Welcome to the BU Prime Time at the Library. This is a collaboration of the Friends of the BU Library and many different offices on campus, and the mission is to encourage lifelong learning beyond the classroom for the entire Bethel community. David Stewart has an announcement in regard to something very exciting.
Trivia point of the day, Edie and I are both from Canada. Moral superpower to the north. That's sometimes referred to. I apologize for reading this announcement, but if I tried to memorize it right now, I wouldn't get the information right. We would like to help you be in a position to win a $250 prize for library research. If you're working on a project right now which involves extensive use of library resources, we invite you to consider applying for a $250 library research prize. The deadline is not until February 15th, so you have time to consider it carefully. Here are the qualifications, as long as you're not graduating before May 2012. The work can be in any medium. It doesn't just have to be a written paper. It could be video, whatever. The work must have been completed in the spring or fall of 2011 or interim 2012. The application does not require additional research beyond a project submitted as coursework. You just have to provide a little essay about the research process. There's information about this on the library website. And there's little slips of paper over there by the food to provide more information, or you can ask any of us in the library staff. Thank you for being in the library today, and I hope your program goes great.
Thank you, David. And I invite everybody to come back on November 17th, which is a Thursday next week, when Isaac Sanborn will present an International Study Abroad Spotlight. He will share his studies and travels in the Middle East, so I look forward to that. I want to introduce this group and the process that we have been on this fall. During the summer, I got a call from Dr. Carl Ruby, who is the Vice President for Student Development at Cedarville University. And he said to me, we at Cedarville are planning to host a conference on immigration, and we would love to have Bethel bring a group of students to this. He said, interestingly enough, this conference is going to be based on the model of a lot of other conferences where schools are invited to come to a particular institution, learn about an issue, social issue of importance for our day, and then those students are going to be challenged to take that information back to their home campuses, start a club, build awareness, do something significant in regard to that particular issue. That is exactly what happened. So through the gift of a donor, friend of Bethel, we were able to take 15 students, Matt Runyon being the we, me and Matt Runyon, were able to take 15 students to Cedarville, was it a month ago? One of our trustees joined us, Dr. George Saltero. I guess he's not a doctor, he's an attorney, George Saltero, and we had a fabulous time. These students are energized. They are doing exactly what Carl Ruby had intended to happen from a conference like this, to bring this back to our campus, do something that would build awareness. And so I'm going to turn it over to the two student leaders of this group, Tanya Blinova and Sarah Northrup, and Tanya's going to start.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Tanya, and just as Edie mentioned, we're kind of a student group. Me and Sarah, we got a lot of people here have a passion for it, and we kind of helped organize this group, and we're just really excited to share what we all went through. And just kind of to begin this, immigration is a really important issue. It's part of our politics. It's going on. It's a big issue that's obviously all around in the media and all around us, so we kind of thought of what a really good reason to address it, just because it is so important. And in our presentation today, we're going to talk about different aspects about how immigration affects like the biblical perspective, the economy, education, child advocacy, and what also we can do. So I'll hand it over to Sydney.
Hello everyone, my name is Sydney, and I will be just explaining a little bit of a biblical perspective on this very controversial topic of immigration. So first of all, I'd just like to explain what the G92 represents. The G is the first letter of the Hebrew word ger, which is translated a number of different ways, some of which are have more negative connotations, but Some of the translations for this Hebrew word ger are stranger, sojourner, foreigner, even some newer translations to avoid the negative connotations of words like stranger, foreigner, or alien. Some of the new translations that are coming out are starting to say immigrant and refugee, which gives us a better understanding of these as people, as fellow persons, and not display a more hierarchical view of who these people are. And the 92 represents the number of times that this Hebrew word ger is used throughout Scripture. So we can tell just the sheer number of it, just that how important it is in Scripture. So one of the usages for this word in Scripture is, so sojourner is a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights. So a non-Israelite, someone maybe like Ruth, who was from Moab, who didn't have the basic rights that the Israelites would have had in their own communities. And I just want to share one of the specific scripture verses. It comes from Deuteronomy chapter 10, and it's verses 18 and 19. It says, "He, God, executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." And so verses like these throughout Scripture just show us how important people from different places are to God, and just how much He cares about them, and wants us to also represent the hospitality and His heart for who they are, for the least of these, among the fatherless, the widow, people who don't have rights. And so just this idea that us as Christians, as followers of Christ, that it means something to us to have other people come to the States and just wanting to advocate for them, be allies for them, not to diminish or demean who they are by any means, but to come alongside them and use our abilities and capabilities as citizens to help and to just create a better future for them. So, thank you, and hand over to Nick.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to be presenting an economic perspective, and this is all information that we gathered at the conference, and this is none of my research. This is not my original research, and I've narrowed it down quite a bit because we don't have a lot of time, and so I'll make 3 main points. The first is that free market principles should promote the free movement of goods as well as workers by the principle of supply and demand. If there's a demand for goods or a demand for workers, it makes sense to bring in the workers. And as far as the economy in the United States, immigrants make up a very large portion of the economic output and a significant contribution to the economy. This is just a little bit of data that shows some of those figures, and it's different for other states. So this is just a small sample. And it's shown that immigration and economic growth usually go hand in hand. And immigrants make a proportionate contribution to economic output, meaning if a state has 10% immigrants, then they will at least make up 10% of the economic output. So they make the same amount or more. And immigrants also spur economic growth, research, and development. And if we're not allowing the workers in, or if we're turning workers away, then there will be a much smaller economic output. Okay, another common argument is that some say that we're paying too much on services to have immigrants here. But as we can see, the state makes up a lot more in taxes paid by immigrants than they spend on them in services. And one of the main points is that the immigrants are coming here to work, and they're not coming here just to sit and collect services. One phrase that they say is, the cowards never came and the weak died along the way. So they're not just coming here to sit and collect services. They're coming here to work and to contribute and to improve their lives. Another reason that we need them here is that our birth rate in the United States does not have the replacement rate to maintain services So if we don't have more people coming in, we're not going to be able to sustain our large population with our services. And these are some of the different taxes that we collect from immigrants versus some of the benefits. So income tax, sales tax, Social Security, property taxes and utility bills are usually included in rent. Excise tax, that's specific fees in addition to sales tax on things like gasoline and tobacco, and various fines and fees. Versus the benefits, the biggest one is probably educational benefits, because all children in the United States are allowed to go to school regardless of whether they're certified or legal citizens. Other public services, I put a star next to emergency medical care because the way that that is reported is often misleading. When a hospital charges for a procedure, they usually say that it costs a lot more than it does after they work it out with insurance companies. And so the cost that's reported usually doesn't exactly represent the cost that the service was. Okay. And my last point is that it does not cause rampant unemployment for Americans. This is one that people are really concerned about right now because there's a higher unemployment rate in the United States. And we can see from where the immigrants are in the different counties, there's actually a lower unemployment rate, and there's a lower unemployment rate in the states themselves, and then there's an even lower unemployment rate in the counties that have a lot of immigrants. Because when there's cheap labor, businesses and companies are able to expand, they're able to hire more managers, lawyers, and other professionals. And the fact that we have tightened up our border a little bit and there aren't more people coming in, they're causing a lot of industries to suffer. There's literally places where crops are just rotting in the ground because they don't have workers to come and fill them. And so the idea that we are competing, Americans are competing for the exact same jobs as a lot of immigrants is very misleading, because that kind of demonstrates that they're coming here for a different type of job than Americans are seeking. And then another really important thing to understand is that if we don't have workers here in the United States supporting our industries, then our industries will have to move to a place where there are workers. So if we want to keep our industries here in the United States, we need to have the labor to be able to sustain them. They need affordable labor in order to keep those industries here. And so in conclusion, immigrants are not toxic to the economy as many people think it is. And I think one of the reasons that, this is my own personal opinion, one of the reasons that it seems like we're so set that it is harmful to our economy is just because of the way that the polls look. And so politicians who are in charge of this sort of thing, they look at the polls and they say, well, people oppose increased immigration, and so we're going to take a stance against that, when they're looking more at polls than they are at the economic aspect.
All right, hello, my name is Cassie. I'm going to kind of focus on one of the speakers at the conference. Her name was Eve. She really kind of focused on the child advocacy part of it, and it is a very kind of touchy and controversial issue. And what a lot of people don't realize when they hear immigration is how much of an impact it has on education and the children of the undocumented immigrants. Her name was Eve Nunez. She's a child advocate from Arizona. She is the president of her organization, and she also ended up is the founder of her own organization. She's had honors from George Bush and from President Obama, and she's just had so much wise information and stuff to say about child advocacy. Excuse me. One of the main things, or one thing that she said was, we can't only just be politically correct about the topic, but also just kind of biblically. Like, we obviously don't want to go breaking the law, but we could go and, instead of doing that, we could be the law. And just really being able to put the child advocacy, putting what we know should happen and what is happening, just kind of put together to like make what it can be, would be really like important to know. Because what it does have a huge influence on the kids and how they learn, and the families and parents of the children of immigrants risk everything to come to America and really be able to start that new life for their kids. And so the children will grow up thinking that they're just like any other American citizen. They grow up, you know, with their sports and all their fun activities, and then they graduate from high school and they realize that either their parents tell them or however they find out that they're not able to apply to colleges to keep extending their education because they are undocumented. And I could only imagine how devastating that would be, kind of having the thought that you no longer can carry out what you wanted to or be able to succeed in the way that you want to because you don't have the papers to show for it. And when you want to keep following your dreams, and those dreams for them just kind of get, just end right there. And so I'll turn it over to Tanya, who will kind of go from there.
All right, just to kind of add to that, and kind of that you mentioned education, that a lot of these children, not just high schoolers, but children of all ages, are affected because these laws, certain laws that are passed, especially like Arizona or Alabama, are essentially hurting the children because they're causing tension in the families, and they're having problems, you know, getting to school, and people like even others have to try to, you know, abide by the law, but also provide compassion and what we are called biblically to do to help the sojourner and the immigrant. But just here to add to that. Another big thing that was mentioned at the conference that kind of goes along with that is with education, the DREAM Act, and I don't know if any of you have heard about it. I hope so. It's kind of been around. Talk about. It stands for Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors, and it was proposed in 2001 to legislation, and since then it has been, it became really close to being passed, but then it was in 2010, it was denied. But basically it is an act that would provide permanent residency to certain undocumented people, and I think that's something people need to realize. It's not just everyone, because a lot of times people freak out and they kind of worry about that it would just be giving amnesty to every single undocumented person, and that's not what it is. It provides amnesty to minors, just like it says alien minors, to children who are of good moral character, so if they have any criminal history, any fraud, anything like that, they would not be eligible. Also, if they've graduated high school, if they arrived to the U.S. as minors, and if they've lived continuously for 5 years in the U.S. here. And this affects a lot of kids, like the ones that Eve works with, where they were brought here when they were 2 or 3, or even, you know, when they're younger, they didn't have a choice, and they grew up here as Americans. This is their home, this is their life. But then when it comes to high school and they want to contribute to our society, they are not given that freedom. And so this DREAM Act just helps be an advocate for those children. And part of this act is that these students would be required to attend 2 years of military or college, and if they do that, they will be given a 6-year residency, and in that 6 years they will be required to continue their education. So it's not like they're just given amnesty and, you know, here you go, just be in America. They're impacting our society, and they would benefiting not just, they would benefit the economy, they would benefit education, the information and the wisdom that, just like all of us, we contribute to society, they also have. So it would also be a great benefit, and it would also reduce deficit and increase revenue because they're able to, with their degrees and with their their status, they could get jobs, they could contribute. The military, that would also benefit because they people who chose to serve there, and also be more competitive, and kind of increase our competitive, a level of competition against other countries, because if we introduce a new level of playing field and new people to our economy and our society, we can kind of compete with other countries like India or China around the world. So, and yeah, just kind of on there, it's not just amnesty, but it's a step towards reform. which I think is very necessary in this time because we're obviously having issues with immigration, and the laws that are now that we have now are not really meeting the needs of our society. And so I think that's important to address. Out of all of this whole conference, I feel like the main thing is that reform is needed. And I think that all politicians and everyone can agree with that no matter what side you're on. So now I will hand it over to Sarah. We'll kind of talk about more resources and what we can do with this information. So.
Okay, so I know we kind of sped through a lot of information, and that was very, very brief little bit about what we did actually at the conference. There was so much information, and I feel like it would probably take days to actually cover all of it. But I wanted to give you guys some resources if you're interested in learning, continuing to learn more. There's many helpful websites. Some of them I just listed 2 up here are undocumentedtv.org, or not .org, just .tv. This is the site that Matthew Soren's, if any of you are familiar with the book Welcoming the Stranger, I also recommend reading it. I put it on the list up there too. He created this website to be a tool for evangelical Christians just to learn more about immigration, and just also for resources for them to really get their communities involved, get their churches involved. And it has just a bunch of different resources. And it has videos. It's a really great website. I'd really recommend checking that out. Also, immigrationpolicy.org is talks more about the politics, and it's very, very well known and just very well established, credible, reliable information. Also, the books I talked about, Welcoming the Stranger by Matthew Soren's, and also Christians at the Border by Daniel Carroll. I know several of the classes here at Bethel require, I think, Christians at the Border is required reading for a few of the classes here at Bethel, so that's kind of cool to know, and just they're both great resources because they really incorporate the Christian aspect of how we are called to really come alongside those who are suffering from a broken immigration system. And then also there's a ton of documentaries and just films that are just so amazing and just really eye-opening. I think it really films can do something that maybe books or other websites can't really do. They really help you see the human face of this issue, and that we're talking about people and people's lives here. It's not just statistics. It's actual people who are dealing with these consequences of this broken immigration system every day. And lastly, I'd just like to just to tell you guys about the excitingness of having this, that probably isn't a word, but about out of this conference, we were hoping to have a student group come out of this who would be able to come back to Bethel and take the information we learned and to increase awareness on Bethel's campus about these issues and to increase dialogue about these issues, because we are at a very critical time. There's 11 to 12 million undocumented people in the United States right now who are people who are living lives who are suffering from a broken immigration system, and this has just gone on too long that Christians, we have stood alongside issues of justice that are very important that affect many people's lives, like the civil rights movement, where many Christians were on the wrong side of that issue. I think this is a very critical issue of our day. Another just very important civil rights issue that I think we as Christians really need to be engaged about. Even if we don't know that much about it, I would just encourage you all to just to check out this information. And also, getting back to the group, we are going to be a part of World Challenge. We're a branch off of that. Our name of the group is going to be G92 Initiative, and the focus of our group is just to increase dialogue on our campus about issues of immigration, and just to increase the awareness so people know what is even going on and they can be well informed about both sides of the debate, and from there people can decide how they feel about this issue. But I think it's critical that people are aware of this. So I think we're going to do a little Q&A time now, but I would just encourage any of you, if you have questions after the Q&A time and you want to speak with us, if you want to get involved in the group in any way, we are very open. We would love to have we'd love to talk with any of you and just to connect. So yeah, my name's Sarah Northrup. Again, thank you for mentioning that. So. Q&A time. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm just kind of going to facilitate the Q&A time. So if there's any questions, we've kind of gone over a lot of things, and the point of this whole conference was to raise awareness of why there is a need for immigration reform. And so some of the points that they've touched on were some of them, to draw people in from this section, and then people from over here and whatnot. So I don't know, there's a lot of information, so do we have any questions, specific questions that anyone would like to share?
But if they, I don't need that. Okay. At the conference, did they talk to you about how to respond to people who are adamantly opposed to lots of immigrants coming to the city? And let me just give you an example. So at the outstate town that I live close to, we have lots of Somali and Sudanese immigrants. And so Sunday after church, I went with another woman to a Sudanese home to deliver some baby things. They just had a new baby, and they asked for supplies. And when we got into their little apartment, there was a big widescreen TV. And as we left, the woman that I was with, the church woman, said to me, well, they're using us because they don't need all these things. Look at, they had that big widescreen. Well, I have my response to that. But did they talk to you about how to respond to some of the attitudes that Americans have? How would you respond to that woman?
Yeah. If anyone else from the group has a response to this too, feel free to let me know. What? Oh. Oh, well, okay. I feel like the conference focused more on the biblical aspect, so people could go back to churches and talk with Christians, and also it was more focused on the Christian aspect, and because of that, I'm not sure how much it focused on just Americans in general, but I don't know if anyone else would have a comment to that. I think, yeah.
I was going to say a big thing, the kind of about the conferences in general, especially with like that kind of issues. I think community. I think obviously you have some interaction with that person, your church does or your community. I think that's just so important, and it was really emphasized. We can talk about economics or politics, but I think the thing that really will change how people think and how they feel about this and how they respond is to really be intentional about building community. So I think, if you talk to that woman and be like, okay, yes, maybe that's what you think, but you need to realize there's another side and to try to build that actual relationship, because I feel like when you actually have that connection and that understanding and you know someone, like at the conference, they were actually undocumented students who presented and they said, I can't get an education. And I think for a lot of us, it's like, wow, it's not just like someone you read on paper. When you see that it's someone, they're not a criminal, they're not like a drug addict or anything, they're actually a student who wants to get an education. Seeing that, I think, is a big difference in just promoting community. So,
you talked about the children being able to get an education. So, are there funds for them to actually get an education, or how do they end up fulfilling that goal of getting an education?
That's kind of part of the issues. There's not really funds, like financial aid. They're not eligible for that. There's also there's not really money. That's part of the problem. A lot of these kids aren't able to go to school, but with the DREAM Act, there's certain organizations, I know here in Minnesota, where there's private scholarships set up, but that's pretty much is the only way. And again, for that to happen, we need to educate people, because if no one knows about it and the state is not providing that money, these kids are not able to go to school. So right now, it's more just private organizations set up. But I think California actually passed kind of part of the DREAM Act, so there will be some funding and scholarships like opened up to undocumented students. But
State funding, you said?
was it state? I think there was some state because they passed, but yeah, it was from California. But it's only in California, so not in Minnesota, at least not yet.
So the idea is, once that DREAM Act is enacted, that states and financial aid and all that kind of
to basically kind of
available.
an equal playing field, just like how we're eligible for financial aid, and I mean, they should also be able to then have a choice. So.
One thing that the undocumented student that actually went up and talked and shared her story, and she said that when she was applying for colleges, she had a great grade point average. She would have been eligible for tons of scholarships if she had the 9-digit magical number. But she wasn't, and she was able to find, there are some schools that will, they don't look at your legal status, whether or not you're undocumented or not. And she went there and she graduated, I think, with a social work degree, but she can't actually practice. So she has the degree, but she can't do anything with it because she can't be approved. So it's that was something that was really interesting to hear. So yeah, they are able to. They have lots of their capabilities are there to receive funding, but they can't actually get any of it. So.
First of all, thank you. This is all really great stuff. It strikes me, though, that the basis of this conference is maybe a bit idealistic in assuming that because people would count themselves as Christians, they would be willing to follow the specific guidelines of Scripture, what it says about political issues that they're afraid about. I think there are educated and thoughtful people in America, like all of the students who went to this conference, who are open to strangers, but I'm hesitant to believe that that's the norm in America. So what do we do about the base issue of people giving their gut reaction and being very prejudiced about a group that they're very unfamiliar with?
I think that was one of the reasons that the economic aspect was so important. I think because for the people who can't identify with the biblical aspect or the moral aspect, that's something that is important to everybody. And I think when we're trying to educate people, I think that issue especially will help to sway politicians and sway voters. And I think that will actually help to start some change or get reform, get the process underway.
I forgot that. Sorry. I was just going to also mention, because you said like that instant kind of gut reaction, that kind of, I guess like the inner prejudice that some people have. And that is something that's a complicated issue for us. We can't just be like, stop being prejudiced, because, it's in people. And I think that that's part of it that we can't fully correct. It might take generations, because, I feel like, especially with children, and I think that's part of the reason we need reform and we need to educate people, because we address the kids. And I feel like the way that children, not just immigrants, but American citizens and American children are taught about this issue will impact how they as adults and what their reaction is to issues like immigration or foreigners or, sojourners, that their reaction hopefully will not be up like their parents and prejudice, but, I actually know about this and I know that I don't feel that way. So I think it's just going to take generations, kind of even like discrimination, it's not something we can just magically wipe out, so.
Just one quick note too about the authors of Welcoming the Stranger, Matthew Sorensen and Jenny Huang. Jenny was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she was in Congress when the DREAM Act was up for vote, like whether or not they were going to approve or not approve it. And it was a statistic that the majority of people supported the DREAM Act, but there weren't enough phone calls of people calling and saying, hi, my name is so-and-so, I live here, and I would like to encourage this senator, this representative to support the DREAM Act. And so it seems like we hear more about the people who don't approve of certain things, and we don't hear enough about the people who do support certain things. So, but no.
So you're talking about raising awareness, and I know there's a lot of resistance. We all have exactly resistance to maybe my phone is interacting with and you talked about the conference and information having a lot of the pros and cons. I'm hearing you saying a lot of pros and not a lot of cons. When I think of the DREAM Act, some people in favor of the DREAM Act have kind of cautioned against some of the aspects of it, like the military service. Are we raising cannon fodder? And are we using immigrants as a way to build our troops and nobody's caring about them? So there's been a lot of pro and con things. And I think when people are against legalizing some immigrants or accepting immigrants, and we only know the pros, it makes us a weak argument. We know the people's argument to be able to respond to them well. So was the conference, you think, equipping you well to understanding the anti-immigrant perspective as well, or was it mostly giving you information about the pro-immigrant aspect? How will you go about either?
I would definitely say it was more on the pro side, but encouraging us to look at both aspects, because there were also people there that from Arizona, and also a member of Homeland Security. He was there and kind of giving his take on it, like, I'm enforcing some of these laws, and his kids went to Cedarville. So I mean, we heard a few different aspects, but it was more towards the pro, but with the understanding that we need to keep looking at this, and we can't just take what we learned here and say this is what everyone's going to believe, and because that's unlikely. That's very idealistic. So I don't know who wants to add to that, or if I'm wrong.
I'm asking that because we looked at the DREAM Act in one of my classes, and it was hard to find scholarly sources against the DREAM Act. Most of the scholars who think about it are in favor of it. And then yet a lot of the people we encounter in daily lives are so fiercely against it. So is there no scholarship because they're wrong? And if they're wrong, how can some people be wrong? I mean, this is what issues here, and I think it's hard to convince people when if it is a gut reaction, then scholarship is not going to help to change people's gut reaction. How can we actually change people's reaction? You guys saying you're not going to improve on campus, changing people over time, and then I think it's hard to have resources that actually impact people's beliefs, because they're gut beliefs, and they're really beliefs in prevention racism and xenophobia, and not beliefs based on economic rationality. And so it's hard to really change that with fancy pro-arguments.
I think, and one of the biggest things is the reason why there is so much information on, the pro aspect of pro-immigration and things like that, and the DREAM Act and those that have actually support it, is because those are the people that are educated on it. And I feel like that is one of the biggest things, and something that's really spurred me on to, looking more into these immigration laws, is because, why are there different sides, and why, if we're only looking at the one aspect, if you're only seeing the positive, why is there opposition? So I think there's just not enough people educated on the DREAM Act, or even just the immigration laws that are in place right now, like SB 1070. Like, I don't think that many people know what's really in it.
How do you bridge that gap between fancy scholars and everyday people? How do you talk to your grandma like this?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's why we're looking to, start this group and start, slowly bringing in people and educating them on what we know, and encouraging them to go on ahead and look for themselves, and not just take what we have to say and, take that as, definite truth, even though maybe it is. But, just like when you go to church, you're not supposed to just say, oh, that's what my pastor says. You look at the Bible and look at, where is this backed up and whatnot. So I think that's what we're hoping to do, is to start actually promoting that and getting people in and educated about this issue.
So will you go to classes? Will you speak at classes and faculty chat?
Yes. Already have been, so.
Like adding. Go for it.
But just to also kind of address like how do we bridge that gap is, I know I mentioned community, I think that's a really big important thing, is that we're hoping to partner with other, just actually get into our community, not just Bethel kind of here, but to also engage, we're hoping to partner with things like even with like Latino groups or on other campuses like La Raza at the U of M, or to actually have that connection with the Latino community, but also other immigrant communities that aren't just Latino, because obviously there are other immigrants. So just to really have not just let's read books about it, but to actually dive into it and interact with these people. So.
Yeah, TCO.
Okay. Well, I guess it sounds like there have been some examples here, but I'm just curious if there are any more. When you guys were at the conference, did you see anything that relates to Minnesota or to your own lives? So, because a lot of this stuff sounds like it's national policy and law and some of those things, but when you reflect on how does this come up in Bethel? How does this come up in your hometown? How does this come up in Minnesota or the Twin Cities? I just wondered if you had any reflections or thoughts that occurred to you at the conference or even now, or you can share some of those. It sounds like you've shared some, but I'm curious if there's any others.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Is this working still? Oh, okay. I'm not exactly sure on the exact number of specifically undocumented immigrants in Minnesota, because I know that's not. They won't be able to estimate that exactly. But I know that there is a huge immigrant population, and it's just growing. There is a large refugee population too. But they still go through many of the same struggles with finding housing and facing many issues of discrimination, maybe not the same as someone who came undocumented. But I think just realizing, volunteering through TCO and other things, you realize that there is a huge immigration population, which staying here just at Bethel, you would remain very unaware of. I'm not sure of the numbers, but I remember even volunteering at TCO at Salem Church. It's the majority of the members are Latino, and many of them were just arrived from places in Latin America, and many of them were undocumented, and they were just, so many of them were scared even to try and speak English, and it was just so disheartening to see how after even a month of tutoring this one woman one-on-one, she was still scared to read this book out loud to me in English because of how many times she'd been called stupid for even trying to speak in the U.S. And I think just things like that remind me of, wow, this is an issue that really, really deeply affects people. And Minnesota has a huge immigration population, so I don't know if someone else add that.
I'm interning at a nonprofit organization in Richfield, and it's actually in the same building as World Relief for Minnesota. And so I work with the Latino clients that come in to my nonprofit, but and a lot of them are undocumented. But I also watch people come in the doors because the office, they're connected with doorways. I mean, I'm seeing people come in all the time looking for support and looking for resources, and calling from places like 211 and stuff like that. And so to me, it's very prevalent, I guess, and it's more just about opening your eyes and going and looking in the community, going beyond our own small life or our church lives. I mean, if you just go out, it's amazing how many. And I can say that I didn't realize as much until I started working there, and then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, and they're all there just looking for help and looking for love and acceptance. And as Christians, that's what we're supposed to do. So yeah. But I think we have to wrap up. Did you want to make?
Is there any questions or anything?
Yeah. Any other questions that
do you want to talk to?
We can, if anyone else has one last question, otherwise some of us will be able to stick around, otherwise I have tests. So, yeah, okay.
When we first moved back here from Chicago, we got here, it was all very white population. But 2 summers ago, we were walking through the park at Snail Lake Park. There was an Asian group up on the hill speaking their language, a Latino group down on the beach speaking their language. There are 4 Anglos walking through the middle of it.
Okay, well, thank you guys for coming.